to POV Italian Cooking in association with Simply Good Food TV, where today we are going to make Pane di Como, or it's also called Como bread. Now before we get started, take a quick second and click that subscribe button in YouTube and download that Simply Good Food TV app. With all the bread I've been making lately, I'm still amazed by how you can take 3 or 4 simple ingredients, mix them together in different amounts, treat them a little bit differently, and get completely different tasting breads. And Como bread, it does use a baiga or a Polish, which is just a multi-day starter. Real simple, don't be intimidated. Also, this bread uses a rising basket or proofing basket. It's also called a banetone or a brat form. But again, don't be intimidated. It's real simple to make. If you don't have a brat form, you can use a large mixing bowl with a heavily floured towel. Como bread is absolutely delicious. It's got a great crust, a great chew. And then the proofing basket I use, and the way I use the basket, gives it a really good shape. It's visually appealing as well as tasting incredibly good. Como bread originated in northern Italy, just outside of Milan. It is popular throughout Italy, but let's get started and make this bread. Let's take a real quick look at the ingredients for our Pane di Como, or Como bread. We are going to have 6 1/4 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour, 2 cups of room temperature water, and a tablespoon of salt. Now we do have a starter for this bread. The starter, I had to write this one down here so I didn't forget all of the ingredients. It has 1 teaspoon of yeast, 1 teaspoon of malt powder or malt syrup, 1/3 cup of warm water, and 2/3 cup of room temperature whole milk, and 1 cup of flour. You dissolve your 1 teaspoon of yeast in the 1/3 cup of water, give it time to bloom, about 10 minutes. Then you pour in your milk, kind of stir that around a little bit. You put your malt powder in your flour, stir that around, just mix them together, and then you're going to cover it with plastic. Stick it in the warm corner of your kitchen overnight, and you'll see here it's kind of bubbly. It will rise and fall overnight. Actually, you want to let it go about 24 hours. And boy, I wish you could see it. There are actually little bubbles coming up on this, and that's just the yeast breathing. That means it's very active, because you will see in this bread there's no other yeast than the teaspoon of yeast that we put in our starter. So let's get to mixing this. What we're going to do is put our 2 cups of water into our stand mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can do this by hand. Then we are going to add our, I'm going to take this dough hook off, or sorry, the paddle off, just to give me a little bit more room. We are going to put our starter into this room temperature water, and boy, you can see it just splashing away. And it's all bubbly, so I know it's alive, and that's what you want. You want it to be alive. All right, so now what we're going to do, one more tap, right? One more love tap. We are going to turn our mixer on, lock our head in here, and we're going to let this mix up, and we want it to break up that starter. And while that's happening, what we're going to do is go ahead and pour our salt into our flour and get it mixing. Let's get our mixer going here. Let that go for just a few minutes. Sprinkle our salt into our flour like so. Just kind of give that a quick stir to kind of get it spread throughout. Now, I am going to put my little splash guard in, because since we've got so much flour, we have 6 1/4 cups of flour here. I'm just scared that it's going to kind of make a little bit of a mess. Well, not scared, I can guarantee it's going to happen. All right, so our starter, it looks like it's broken up. Doesn't take very long. So now what we're going to do is slowly incorporate our 6 1/4 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. We're going to let the paddle do as much work for us as we can. Now this is going to be a little bit of a sticky dough, at least early on. All right, the paddle's done its job, so let's go ahead and turn this off. Getting my small scrapers here. And what we're going to do, scrape this off and get your dough hook on. What we're going to do, lock this in, start this on the first speed and let it go for just a minute or two. Then I'm going to turn it up to speed 2, and we're going to let that go for about 3 to 5 minutes to get this dough kneaded. You can see here it's starting to ball up pretty good. I'm going up to my second speed. That goes for about 3 to 5 minutes until you see it come together as kind of a nice smooth ball, or at least that it starts to. So my mixer's going for about 3 minutes. It's actually looking really smooth, so we're going to go ahead and get this stopped. It's just slightly sticky to the touch, which is perfect. Push it down off there real quick. Now I am going to knead this just a tiny little bit by hand, because I think it's important that you got to handle your dough a little bit. You got to touch it. You got to make sure it's smooth. I mean, it looks smooth, but I want to just make sure that underneath that top layer that it feels real smooth. Oh my gosh, this is slightly tacky. It is velvety smooth. As I'm kneading it like this, I can tell you there are no tight chunks or anything. You can see how I always knead my bread as I push away, I pull back, and then I give it a little spin, push away. That dough is perfect. I got a big bowl because this dough will at least double in size. You can see it's a pretty hefty ball of dough as it is right now, so you want a big bowl. Remember, for your dough to rise, you need two things. You need warmth and you need moisture. The moisture for this is going to come out of the dough itself. The warmth, just keep your house warm. And the way I'm going to make sure that the moisture stays in the dough, as you've seen in all my other videos, we're going to cover this with plastic wrap. So we will cover, this is a new box of plastic wrap, so I'm going to struggle with it, and I might, use some 4-letter words about the plastic wrap that I'll have to then edit out of the video. But at any rate, we're going to cover this. This bowl is so wide that I'm going to cover it both ways, because we do not want any of the moisture that remains in our dough to escape. It needs that to rise. Now what we have to do, first rise on this dough is an hour and a half. Find a nice warm corner of your kitchen, put it there, make sure that plastic wrap doesn't come off, and we're going to be back in an hour and a half. The first rise for our Como bread, or Pane di Como, is complete, but before we get our dough out and we cut it, this dough will do its second rise in brat forms or banetones, which are really they're proofing baskets. Now, when you buy these come with like a fabric liner. I don't like to use the fabric liner because I like the bread to rise and kind of get that shape from the brat forms on it. Now, one thing, if we just put our dough in here, it's going to stick really, really bad. So what we have to do is we have to use a liberal amount of flour. And what we're going to do is in the brat forms themselves, we are going to kind of try to press that flour in there. And you'll see that it kind of forms, it will fill in those gaps. We just really want to press it in there and make sure that we completely cover it with flour. Yeah, we'll probably get a little flour on our countertop, but part of the fun is to clean up afterwards, right? So what I'm going to do is take my excess flour and just dump it over in there. You'll notice I did not tap this, because if I tap it, it's all going to fall out of my grooves, but I just want to make sure that I kind of press it out, make it loose. We're not going to overly knead this dough. We do need some flour down, because we're just going to put the dough here, and then we're just going to cut it, shape it, and put it in our brat form. You can see our dough has doubled in size, looks really good. And all I'm going to do is I'm not going to work it. I'm just going to turn it out on my floured section. We're going to cut it in half, right down the middle. And then we're going to shape it. The way I like to do it is we're just going to kind of take our dough, stretch and pull it into itself. Stretch and pull. The why we're doing that is, you'll see when I pick this up, when I pick this dough up, I have a nice smooth top. So when you have your nice smooth top, we're just going to take this Put the smooth top down into our brat form. Not going to press it in, just going to leave it set like this. This is going to rise for at least an hour. What I like to do with my brat forms is I will take a nice big tea towel, I'll get this wet with hot water, and I'll just cover my brat forms. I'll probably warm this up about every 15 minutes because for your bread to rise appropriately, you need moisture and warmth, and that's going to give it both, in addition to my kitchen being warm. So in 1 hour, we'll check these, and then we'll plop this in the oven. Halfway through the second rise, so 30 minutes into the rise, we're going to turn our oven on to 400 degrees. Now I do have a baking stone. If you don't have a baking stone, that's fine. But if you do, put it in your oven. Let it heat up for 30 minutes. You want that oven nice and hot when you put your dough in. All right, so we're going to get this rising, then we'll be back. So our bread is done rising. This is the Como bread. You could see that it has risen. Now the one in the oblong brat form hasn't risen as much as the other. That's okay. These are going to be great. Now, what I want to do is this is just my way of doing it. I'm just going to put just a tiny little bit of flour over the dough because I don't want it to stick to my parchment paper. But what I'm going to do to get these out of the brat forms, because I don't want them to stick, move that out of the way, I'm going to lay the parchment paper over the brat form, over the dough, invert it, and hopefully, pull my plate out there, hopefully this will come, ooh, it just popped out. Look at that. The thing I like about the brat forms is you can see on the dough itself, it's got a nice little floury shape to it, a little spiral shape caused by the flour. I think that's cool. My oven has been warming up 400 degrees for a half an hour. These are going to bake at 400 degrees for 1 hour. Now, I'm going to keep a real close eye on them. If they start to get a little bit too brown, I'll check them and pull them out. We'll be back in an hour to check on these beautiful loaves. So I just checked the Pane di Como, the Como bread, and it's ready to come out of the oven. So I'm going to step over here real quick, grab it, and I'll be right back. It kind of busted through the side. That's okay. I love it when bread does that. Got our second loaf ready. Looks outstanding. Now we're going to let this cool for 5, 10, 11 minutes, whatever. I want it to cool down enough to cut, but still a little bit warm to melt that butter. We'll let this cool. We'll be right back. Our Como bread has cooled and is ready to cut. Nice crust on that. Nice heavy crust. You can see, nice and open on the inside. Let's give this, get a little butter on this piece right here. Always gotta have butter with your bread. Let's give this a try. And I am gonna kind of break away the outside here so I can get to that nice inside. Oh,
it's good.
That crust is so good. It does have a good bite to that crust. But the soft inside, absolutely. Amazing bread. Highly recommend it. Just a lot of fun. I love making bread now. So anyway, with that, thank you so much for watching POV Italian Cooking. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google+. But most importantly, don't forget to click that subscribe button in YouTube and download the Simply Good Food TV app where you can see this episode and every episode of POV Italian Cooking. Thanks for watching, and ciao!